It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Dale Wills, owner and founder of Centra Companies. Centra is a group of land development, real estate, and construction companies based out of the Twin Cities and Minneapolis. Since 2011, he has overseen the completion of more than $500 million in new construction across over 50 projects, spanning 28 Twin Cities suburbs, ranging from new home construction to apartment rehab and commercial buildings. With more than 35 years of experience in property development, Dale has taken Centra Companies to new heights, opening several divisions, including Centra Homes and Centra Capital Partners under his leadership. Dale Wills, welcome into the corner office.
Brent, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Where does the podcast find you today?
Today I'm in the Twin Cities. I've been all over the country this week. I've been in Phoenix and Salt Lake, and decided to come back to my home base for the day.
Lots of stuff going on in real estate, and with rates going down, probably more stuff to come in the future. So exciting times ahead, and looking forward to getting into what's going on at Centra. But we always kind of like to start the podcast with kind of those early origin stories of our CEOs. So tell us a little bit about your early years, where you grew up and what your early family life was like.
Yeah, I'm the seventh of 10 kids. Grew
Wow.
up in Northern California, just at the base of the Sierras. Yeah. So it's
big family.
As you can imagine, with your just being the seventh of 10, at some degree, you're just kind of left to your own devices at some level. Mom can't tend to all of us at once.
Right.
Yeah. So I got my first taste in being an entrepreneur. It was my third grade year. So I don't know, what are you, about 8 years old in third grade?
8 years old. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and I decided, my parents had no agriculture real background. We lived just on a couple of acres with no animals, and I got this idea to raise pigs. And so I would, you can imagine an 8-year-old coming to you and saying, "Hey, Brent, do you like pork?" And most people say, "Yeah." And it's like, would you love to have a variety of fresh pork? And most people say, yeah. And that was kind of my first foray into selling. I fell upon the idea of getting people to say yes repeatedly. And
I love that. Where did that come from, though, Dale? I mean, what a crazy idea for an 8-year-old. I love it.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I can't really answer that, because I look back and I'm like, man, I was a really weird 8-year-old.
What did mom and dad do? What were their professions?
Well,
I know what mom was doing. Mom had a lot of kids at home, I'm sure, for the most part.
They were super supportive. My parents, I never heard them say no to any idea I ever had. No matter how silly the idea was, they were always, supportive and say, "Son, that's a great dream. How are you going to execute? How are you going to make that happen?" And that has impacted me throughout my life, because I can always hear my parents in the back of my head encouraging me, saying, just do it. You can do anything. Anything is possible. And they did the same. They were like, figure this out, go make money. We were really poor, growing up. And so they had no resources. So I had to figure out how to fund the entire venture. But they were great through that entire time. And just from there, I've been self-employed more than I've been employed throughout my life. I've had jobs where I've been employed by other people, but being self-employed is really where, starting at that 8 years old through now, And I did different adventures all through, middle school and high school, trying to make money. And one interesting story. It was the end of my sophomore year, and I was in a home economics class, and we had to do a report of, okay, you graduate from high school, you have to move out on your own. What are all your expenses? How are you going to make a living? And so I did it, and it was an unusual for me in that I actually did the report and worked on it fairly hard, and I got a D minus. I was like,
Oh,
I really worked really hard. I went to the teacher. I said, why did I get a D minus? She was, you're being totally unrealistic. You could never do this right out of high school. You can't make that much money. And I said, well, I don't understand because I make that much money right now. This is actually what I do. I was buying cars at a wholesale auto auction, fixing them up and selling them at high school. I said, I'm making this right now. So you're telling me when I graduate I'll make less? And she basically called me a liar. And that was kind of the beginning of the end of me going to high school.
and working for somebody else, I can imagine as well. Well, I want to hear about the pork venture. So were you actually, did you actually raise pigs and then slaughter them yourself and prepare the
Yeah, so I,
bacon?
I would
Tell us.
go and say, I'd convince you to buy a pig. I say, okay, Brent, so you got to pay me half your money right now. And then when I
Okay.
deliver, you'll pay the other half. Well, I figured out that if you paid me half, I could buy the pig, I could buy all the feed to get them all the way ready for processing. And so I had no cash outlay. So you funded my
Yeah.
entire adventure, the buyers would. And then when I was done, the processor would come pick up the pig, process
Got
it,
it.
and then I would pay them when we picked up the meat. So you would go and pay them for the processing plus the balance that you owed me, and there I got all my profit. So I was out no
Yeah.
cash, and yeah, I did that for several summers. I would get 4 to 8 pigs and raise them and make some money, and it worked fantastic.
I love it. I love it. And did you put the money aside for a rainy day? Were you spending it on local vices? Tell us a little bit about what you did with the
Well,
money you made.
that's a lesson that I have had to learn the hard way. I spent it all on just stupid things that an 8-year-old shouldn't spend money on. I,
I
I do
love
know
it.
for a period of time, my parents just had very little money. And so most of our clothing was, hand me downs from older siblings or, used or really cheap, the most affordable thing we can get. And I can remember about that same year, we had a Kmart that moved to town. And it was new, and everybody's embarrassed to shop at Kmart because that meant you were poor. And so we
Hmm.
go into the store, and you'd hide to make sure you didn't see anyone. And you know, I look back and it's like, well, if you see somebody they're at Kmart too. So, but I can remember um, I got a new pair of shoes, which was unusual, and the shoe brand was called Trax, Traxx, I think it was. And I remember so proud of my new shoes, and I go to school, get on the bus, and kids were making fun of me, and they said uh, they made up this jingle, "Traction Tracks" from Kmart, and they were making fun of me, and it was at that point it's like I'm not gonna ever let this happen again. And
Hmm.
so I'd use a lot of my money buying my own clothes or food and things that my parents could afford, and then clearly stupid things that a 8-year-old shouldn't be spending their money on. But and then as I get older and have businesses and you start maturing and, you know, really I can see a pattern of that. And I think that's part of the important thing when you have a business is the language of business is accounting. And, I
Hmm.
don't have an accounting degree and I'm not an accountant, but if you can't understand your financial statement and how to read it, most people read a financial statement, they jump right to the bottom line, or they look at their bank account. But if you can't read your financial statement, your balance sheet, you don't know the language of business and you're going to be in real trouble one day. And so
Right.
I'm a big believer in that. And I've learned that repeatedly the hard way, starting at 8 years old with a pig business.
Right. Right. And did you ever think about going to college, or that experience in high school pretty much said, you know what, I know what to do. I need to get out there in the business world.
Well, I'm still coming to grips with it. I'm a little embarrassed of this. And I'm still learning to be okay with the story. But my junior year of high school, I got expelled from high school. And I went to an alternative high school. They said, all right, you need to go to this alternative high school. And so I went and I sat down with a principal, vice principal, somebody in the office. and they're orienting me to the school. And one of the things they said, all right, if you show up to school every day, that's 50% of your grade. Said that if you show up with a pencil every day, that's the other 50% of your grade. He says, so let me get this right. So if I show up every day with a pencil in hand, I will get straight A's. And he says, yeah, that's right. I thought, man, what a colossal waste of my time. So they told me where to go for my first class. I got up, I walked out of the office and walked off campus, and I never went back. So not only did I not go to college, I bypassed half of high school as well.
Well, right straight into their entrepreneurial world. So, what were you doing at the time, and what became that first job?
So at that time, I was working at a gas station. It's a kind of gas station we don't see anymore, but it had a full service row where we would go and pump their gas for them and check their oil and clean their windshield, check their air in their tires, and then we had self service, and then we had 3 mechanics bays where we had mechanics that would do any kind of mechanical repair, whether it be change your brakes or put an alternator in. And then we had a car wash. We did a lot of tires, and so I was working there. And when I quit high school, the owner asked me if I would manage it. So here I'm a 16-year-old kid, and they asked, I guess I'd have been close to 17 at that point, and they asked if I'd manage it, and I'm like, yeah, of course. And so they went on this, like, I think it was a 3-month cruise. They just
Ah,
left this business to this kid, and I'm managing these mechanics that are in their 40s and 50s, and a bunch of kids that would come and pump gas, and so that was my first experience really running if you will, a significant business and managing other people. Up to that point, it was a lot of adventures like raising pigs, where you didn't have to learn any people skills and the HR side of the business. Um, so it was a good learning experience, and I look back and go, that man, those owners were crazy.
how did you acclimate to managing people, particularly folks that were a lot older than you at that time?
I was really lucky. The mechanics were really great guys, and they were all asked if they would manage it, and they all said no. And so there
Hmm.
was no ego of why is this kid managing us. And and I was really fortunate because they took me under their wings and really kind of mentored me on all right, what should you do, and how should you do it. And I just remember them being very kind and you know being very friendly and coaching me on, okay, you need to make sure you do this or that, and so it was a really very positive experience in just learning some of those skills of managing a team.
And how did that business do over those few months that the owners were gone?
We did really well. As actually we so it was a large corporation, and they would come do these periodic inspections to make sure you're meeting the franchise standards. So they're looking, is everything clean? Is it presented right? And I knew this was inspection was coming, and so I got a couple of the guys that were working there and said, "Hey, let's really nail this inspection. You guys want to stay late, and we'll get some pizza and sodas and chips, whatever you want, just all you want." And so 3 nights in a row, we worked until 2, 3 in the morning. And, the islands where the pumps are, you repaint those curbs so they look fresh, and you power wash the bays and those kinds of things. So for 3 nights in a row, we worked really late, worked really long hours. And I remember the inspectors showed up, and the business was really busy when they showed up. And so we were running. And I'm like, hey, I'm sorry, I'd love to spend time with you, but we're really busy. I got to take care of the customers. They're like, no, that's okay. And it kind of milled around for a while, hoping to talk, but we just stayed busy, which was unusual. And it just stayed busy, busy, busy. So I never really got to chat with them at all, which I was at the time really sad about, because we'd worked so hard, to impress them. And I wanted to hear the praise. I wanted them to say, wow, you're amazing. And so I didn't get any of that. But a couple weeks later, we got the report, and we got the highest rating you could get for the inspection.
Fantastic. I
And,
love
and they
that.
put a note that really made me feel great. Of we got this teenage kid running this gas station and gets the highest, good job kind of a thing. And so that was a lot of fun, and learned a lot about working really hard and
Yeah.
motivating people to stay late with me to make it happen.
I love it. And what happened when the owners came back in 3 months from their cruise? Did you stay on there?
Um, no, I ended up leaving shortly thereafter. Um, it was one of those I had conquered and was
Yeah,
successful, and now there was no challenge left. Just
yeah.
running a gas station is not very fun in and of itself, and we were successful. It's like there's nothing more I can accomplish here, nothing more I can learn or grow. And so I ended up leaving shortly after they got back onto some new activities to learn.
Right. Well, I know that you eventually ended up in the real estate business and kind of been in and out of it over the years, but tell us kind of what came next. What was the next industry you went out to conquest?
So I worked in construction for a short period of time, in the actual trades, physically working on homes, and I did that for a short period, and then met my wife. We got married at a very young age. She was 19, I was 21, and somebody we knew offered me a job to work in mortgage banking, and it was in Las Vegas. We were in Northern California, and I said, "Sure, I'll do that." And so I went to Las Vegas, and I've never had a loan in my life at this point, and had never owned a home. And here now I'm supposed to convince people to borrow money to buy a house from me, and so we went down, and I remember it was a Wednesday, and they're doing the orientation, telling me what to do, and they're like, "Okay, now go out and go hustle up some loans." I'm like, well, how do I know if people can get a loan or not? And they're like, well, you just learn as you go. I said, well, you talk about these underwriters that underwrite the loans. How do they know? And they said, oh, they go to this class, and then they got these reference books. I said, well, you have those reference books, and they did. And it was, this is before computers were what they are, and there's these binders that are probably 4 to 5 inches thick, and they had four of them. They said, yeah, these are the guidelines. I said, hey, am I allowed to read that? And they kind of laughed, said, yeah, be my guest. So I took those binders home, and at this point, I don't know that I'd read 3 or 4 books in my entire life at this point. I wasn't much of a student, but I took them home and I read through them all over the next 5 days. Brought them back on Monday, and they said, "So did you read anything?" I said, "Yeah, I read all of it." They're like, "You kidding me? I don't know even an underwriter that's done that." But what that did for me is it really started a pattern of constantly learning and educating yourself and growing.
Mm,
You just never stop, and that pattern still today. Your podcast is a fantastic example of learning and from other people and books. I read 50 to 60 books a year, and that's when that pattern started. Was I saw the value of really absorbing and gathering information. Started at that point. So I did that for a while. Ended up moving to Utah. We moved to Utah, and I worked in banking for a period there. Worked for another home builder for a while. Worked for a company that the home builder, I was working administrative, so the marketing and strategic aspect of it. And then went to work for a company that started a city from scratch. And,
mm.
so we had to create the water infrastructure, the sewer infrastructure, the golf course, the commercial center, all of that, which was really a big deal. Um, and then I left the industry for a short period of time. I had an opportunity to buy a Radio Shack franchise and ended up buying 3 of them. And in the year, let's see, it would be 1999. We had the largest Radio Shack franchise in the world, the highest producing Radio
Wow.
Shack franchise in the world. And so that was a lot of fun. But I realized I loved the challenge of growing it, but Radio Shack for me was just really unsatisfying. Meaning, if Radio Shacks didn't exist, they don't exist today, and nobody cares,
Right.
nobody notices because they don't really provide value. The stuff that you could buy at Radio Shack, you can get anywhere. And I love real estate because I'm making a difference in people's lives. We're
Mm.
creating communities where memories are made. And so I was drawn back and started my own home building company for a period of time. We sold that business, and then went to work for a national builder for a few years, and then decided to go back out on my own and started Centra Companies, which we do land development, home building. We do some commercial, some apartments and other things. And then we've got a real estate equity fund where people can co-invest with us in the projects that we're doing. So Yeah, that's the short version of the whole history that brings you up to today.
That's great. Well, what brought you to the Twin Cities?
So I was working for a national company, and I was working at their corporate offices in Salt Lake City, Utah. And they asked me if I would come to Minneapolis for a short period. They had operations here that were struggling, and they asked if I would come here. And so I said, sure. Well, actually, first yeah, let me think about it. So I went to my office and I looked up where in the heck is Minnesota. I'm like, I don't even know where this place is. And so I looked it up. And I'm like, yeah, I think that's a pretty cold place. And so I talked to my wife and we decided, yeah. So I went and I said, yeah, we'll do it, but 3 years max. I don't want to stay in Minnesota. We want to come back out west where family is. And so we'll do it for 3 years. We'll get it turned around. We'll train somebody up to take it over, and then I'll come back out here. They said, yeah, that's a deal. And that was 18 and a half years ago. And here we
There you go.
continue to stay in Minnesota. So
Yeah.
Minnesota's great.
What was
We love it.
what was the attraction? Yeah. What did you found about living
Um,
there, and what do you love most?
I think when we moved here, moving kids can be really hard. Uprooting them from their friends, their social circles, their schooling. And so it was a tough transition when we moved here. And so in part it was we were concerned about the kids and making sure that we didn't disrupt them again. And then just there's great variety here. We love sports. There's a lot of sport opportunities. We love the outdoors, and there's so much outdoor activities. We've got a cattle farm that we love. We love going to theater. So we love a variety of things, and that's just we've got those opportunities here, and then we've got a major airport that I can get to just about any city in the United States, direct flight. So for me, that's pretty attractive as well for personal and business. So it's
That's
just a
great.
great place to stay. So we stay.
What was the motivation for founding Centra back in 2011?
So, it's interesting. A lot of what I have done, I've done because I have a negative belief system. And, we all have belief systems, and sometimes they're empowering and sometimes they're not. And that's what we've got to evaluate. If it's an empowering belief system, whether it's true or not, who cares if it's going to empower you? If it's not going to empower you, then you need to reconsider your belief systems. But for me at that time, we had 2008, the economy collapsed, and a lot of the people that had jobs similar to mine, had advanced degrees, law degrees, MBAs, from prestigious schools. And so my belief system was I was unemployable. Who's going to hire me when I'm competing with these people with these advanced degrees and all this experience? And in 2010, it became very evident that I needed to make a change. And so with my belief system being that I'm unemployable, it's like, well, I've worked for myself a lot. I love working for myself. So let's go do it again and see if we can make it happen. And so, I don't know if that belief system's true or not, if I was unemployable, but it empowered me. It was a positive
Hmm,
thing in that, I made positive changes and have grown a very large company as a result of it. And so I embraced that belief system and started Centra Companies.
there you go. And how many employees today?
We run a really lean operation. We'll do about 60 million in revenue this year, and I think we're right around, I think 16 or 17 employees.
Nice.
Um,
And is it all land development in terms of residential housing? Are you doing multifamily, commercial?
The vast majority of it right now is residential. We do a little bit in multifamily and commercial that will play in those arenas, but based on the greatest opportunities we're seeing today, it's all residential housing, first time buyer product, because that's where we're seeing the biggest demand and the greatest opportunity.
Great. And that's all in the Twin Cities area?
That is correct. Yeah, we started 8 months ago. We started Centra Capital Partners to allow people to co-invest in projects, and with that, we're looking at some other projects um, that are similar to what our core strengths are in other markets in the United States.
So you've got a bit of a fund as well then.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And you think about kind of your leadership skills, going back to that 16-year-old running the gas station versus, where you are today with your 16 people and growing this business. What do you think's changed and what's stayed the same?
I don't know that much has stayed the same. Um, you know, the hope is that we're always better today than we were yesterday, and so I guess some of it that has never changed is my desire to grow, my desire to be better, to be the best. That those inherent traits of my personality have changed. I mean, have not changed rather. The things that have changed is, I'm a significantly better businessman today than I was even 5 years ago. A better leader, a better motivator. One of the things I aspire to do, and I'm really not very good at, but I really aspire is I think we have two types of leaders. There's the type of leader that compel people to do the best and the ones that inspire. So whether it's a volunteer organization or a business or within a faith organization, the person that is compelling you to be your best is, Brant, you need to do this or you'll be fired. And that's a lot of leaders take that approach. Whereas the one that inspires, it's hey Brant, we're going to do our best because we create communities that memories are made. We create communities where families have dinner, where memories are made going to the theater, where people learn to ride bikes, and that's awesome. And let's make the best community we can. And so I really work and strive towards that of how do I be a leader that's inspiring people to be their best. I have my shortcomings, but that's an area where I do pretty well at. Whereas, the conventional wisdom that I was taught at a young age is, if you don't show up and do this, I'm going to have to fire you. And so I would say that's a big pivotal difference for me on growing teams.
Yeah, great. Most companies have some sort of employee retention issues. What do you do that's different that keeps people at Centra?
One of the things we have core values, and a lot of companies have core values. And unfortunately, for most companies, core values are aspirational, meaning this is what we're aspiring to be. Whereas for us, we have 5 core values that they're non-negotiables. This is part of the requirement. If you want to work here, this is who you need to be. And so we hire based on those core values. I'm involved in the hiring process for everybody, but I don't get involved till the end. So if we're hiring somebody in accounting as an example, by the time I'm involved, they've already been qualified. They know how to do accounting. They know how to do their job. They're qualified to do their job. When I meet with them, I am strictly focused on the culture and the core values. And so I'll have conversations with them. An example, one of our core values is do right. And and so, by definition, it's we always do the right thing no matter what the cost is. And well, if I ask you, hey, Brant, one of our core values is do right. What do you think about that? Well, everybody's going to give the same answer because they already know what you're looking for. Oh, yeah, yeah, I always do the right. Whereas instead, I will just talk and try and extract stories out of them to determine whether
Hmm.
or not they meet our 5 core values and just hear stories. And then it puts them a little bit more at ease. So you usually get a little more of the raw version of them because now you're just chatting. And so I find that very effective. It's just a kind of a fireside chat. Tell me what's going on. Tell me about your life, and then ask questions to try and integrate those 5 core values to see, do they meet those core values? And then
Yeah.
we also coach and train on that. And so we hire you based on that. And if you're deficient in some area, we start coaching and we try to help you to meet those core values again. Because if you're with us at some time, you met them. And then if they don't, then we give them the opportunity to go to a different employer that might meet their core values a little better. But I think that's a real key on the retention. I've got people. We've got one guy who's retiring at the end of this year. He's been working with me since '06. I moved to Minnesota in 2006. We've got another guy that has been with me since 2006, and he's still going strong. We've got another gal that just retired last month. She's been working with me since '06. So we've been really lucky that people stick around. I just think the core values is a lot of that reason of we do what we say and we live that and it's part of who we are.
Love that. What do you find to be the most effective kind of executive development tools? You mentioned you read a lot of books. Is it there where you find it? Is it experiential? How do you keep your knife sharpened, so to speak?
It's for me, it's a combination of things. Um, I read 50 to 60 books a year. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I go, at the beginning we were talking about where I've been. I was in Phoenix on Monday and Tuesday for, development. I'm part of a group called Genius Network. And it's a lot of business people, and we get together and we learn from each other and learn from the experts. Um, and it's everything. Genius Network example. We talk about health, we talk about business, we talk about families, and so it's holistic. There's another organization I belong to called Strategic Coach, and I go there quarterly. And so I'm a big believer in, find groups that are going to serve you, that are going to elevate your thinking. I love going to these because these are really smart thinkers that are thinking big and very strategic. So it elevates my thinking and then helps me stay at the top of my skill set. It sounds awful hypocritical, but I tell people always never stop your education. It sounds a little hypocritical coming from a guy that dropped out of high school in his junior year. But it's really sad. I so often we see people that they graduate college and their education's over. And
Hmm.
what a terrible disservice to themselves when they do that. And so you just got to get engaged. And when something runs its course, you graduate on and you go try something new. Once an organization maybe doesn't fit your needs anymore.
How do problems get solved at Centra, and when do you get involved, Dale?
I don't get involved in a lot of problems at this point anymore. We've got presidents of the various divisions of the company. We're part of entrepreneurial organization system, and so we have meetings each week that people bring the issues. And a lot of times you go to a meeting and you're playing whack-a-mole, that old dumb game where just mole pops up. And the goal is that what is the cause of these moles keep popping up? How do we get rid of them so we don't have to keep whacking them in the head? And so that's part of what we do is what is the actual issue? What is the real underlying issue? Is there a process that are missing? Is there a standard operating procedure? Is there communication breakdown? What is it? And how do we resolve that so we never talk about it again?
Hmm.
And that technique really is, we find, very effective, because you find if you look back in history of your meetings that you have, you start seeing patterns that you're talking about the same things. It's like, okay, so what's the underlying root cause that's causing this mold to keep popping up, and how do we solve it? Because the goal is when we have meetings that we're really talking bigger picture strategic on how do we grow and improve and be better as a company versus solving these routine day-to-day issues.
Yeah, I love it. Company culture is so important. In fact, we talked about that a month or so ago when we were getting ready for this podcast. How would you best describe Centra's, company culture, and what do you do to propagate that?
A lot of it has to do with the core values. We're um, my family is extremely important to me, and you read these culture books, and it's we're gonna have ping pong tables, and we're gonna have these napping pods, and we're going to, all you can drink, cokes in the fridge, and we just don't do any of that. It just it's not who we are. When I get done, more often than not, I want to go spend some time with my kids, with my wife. I'm not going to go to the club or to the bar after work and hang out with you. And so what we find is, because that's who I am, that's who we attract in the company. And so a lot of our people, family is extremely important to them. Now, don't get me wrong, we do events. I've got a cattle farm, and next week we've got everybody in the companies come out, and we're going to shoot trap. We're going to shoot shotguns, and I'm going to barbecue some hamburgers from the beef on the farm, and so we do those kinds of things. We have a lot of fun together, but for us, the culture is more about, are these people that I like being with? When I go to a meeting, am I going, oh my gosh, Brant's in that meeting again, I just can't stand, or am I like, man, Brant's here, this is exciting, we're going to solve some problems and we're going to do something fun. And so it's really making sure you have people that are aligned on what are their values. And it's not that going to a bar afterward and having drinks is a bad value. That's just not who we are.
Hmm.
And so you want to make sure you have alignment with your people. And as you do that, you attract more of those same, and that helps the culture. But if we have a business that a bunch of people like to go to the club afterwards and a bunch of people go to their kids' soccer games, that can create conflict of, well, how come they don't want to hang out at the club with me, or why do they always feel like I need to go to the club? I've got a soccer game I need to go to. And so
Yeah.
you get people that have similar aspirations and dreams and values. That really helps a lot, I think, with that culture issue.
I love it. Dale, we're just about out of time, but we always have one last question we ask all our CEO guests, and that's what kind of career and life advice would you give to someone who has their eyes on their own corner office someday?
I think we talked about it a little bit already, and I'll double down on it. I'm a big believer in you become the average of your 5 closest friends. And if you're looking at it and you say, okay, I want that corner office, I want to have my own business, and picture, where do you want to be 10 years, 20 years from now? And when I ask that question and I say, now, of those 5 closest friends, how many of them are living that life? And if somebody gives me an answer of more than 0, I say, your dreams aren't big enough, because there's no way those people are hanging out with you on a regular basis. So how do you do that then? Because if I've got big dreams, those people aren't hanging out with me. They're hanging out with other people that are there as well. And so how do you solve that? And that's where you solve that through going and reading books, listening to podcasts. This is a perfect example. This podcast, you bring on guests that are big thinkers and big dreamers. And that's how you create your group of 5. Still stay close to friends. We need that. We need connection. We need human connection. But how do you create bigger thinkers? I've belonged to a lot of organizations over the years, different business organizations. And there's a time where it's like, okay, I've matured beyond that, my experience. So I need to go find a bigger thinking group. And, when you first start out, getting books at the library, listening to podcasts, these things are free. And then as you grow, now you've got some money you can invest in some of these organizations and more formal training. And, and then eventually, if you're growing, you're going to outgrow some of those groups, and you move on and you find a new group. But just never stop learning, never stop growing, and surround yourself, however that looks, whether it's with humans, whether it's podcasts, reading, always surround yourself with people that are thinking bigger than you.
Sage Counsel. My guest today is Dale Wills. He's the founder and owner of Centra Companies. Centra is the preeminent residential and redeveloper in the Twin Cities metro area. Their primary focus includes land development, new home construction, apartment rehab, and commercial buildings. Dale Wills, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Brett, thanks for having me.
Hey listeners, we're now including your questions with our CEO guests. If you'd like to send in a voice memo, send it to info@go4roi.com, and we'll read it on the air to one of our future CEO guests. Thanks so much for listening, and share it with friends.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.go4roi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.